Us right now to react. Senator, I know you were in attendance at the inaugural yesterday, and now as you look at these leftists out on the West Coast vandalizing those buildings, apparently they don't like Joe Biden. Not one bit. They don't like it and they don't like law enforcement. They don't like his crime bill. They want him to be more aggressive when it comes to immigration and climate change and all that stuff. But they're doing pretty much the same things today that they were doing 5 months ago.
Yeah, Steve, just a few months ago, I remember the media and the Democrats blaming all this Antifa violence on Donald Trump. And yet here we have Joe Biden in the White House, and Antifa is still rampaging in the streets of Portland and Seattle and Denver. This proves the point I made months ago, proves the point I made 2 weeks ago, is that when you have a mob using violence for political ends, it doesn't matter what slogan they're chanting or what flag they're waving, they have to be met with force, and force has to be used to deter that violence, and if it breaks out, to stop that violence. That has to be the standard that we apply, whether, no matter what slogan a mob is chanting.
Absolutely. And you know what? When it starts out the same way every day. It's a protest. It's a demonstration, which is protected by the First Amendment. But then ultimately it devolves, and it devolved again yesterday. Some of the people, senators, said, we don't want justice. We want revenge. So they want revenge, which is different than having your day in court.
Yeah, Steve, that's right. Again, these mobs that we see on the streets of Seattle and Portland and Denver that represent Antifa, which I guess maybe is not just an idea, some Democrats have said. Ultimately, what they want is to overthrow America. They hate America. They're not rampaging in the streets because Joe Biden is president. They weren't doing it last summer because Donald Trump was president. They're doing it because they hate America.
I don't understand why anybody still lives in that downtown area where every night in Portland is the same. It's just a rerun. It's like on a loop. Meanwhile, because you were at the inaugural yesterday, you saw with your own two eyes that history of Kamala Harris being sworn in as the first woman vice president in history. That is fantastic. But she also, and this is something we were talking about before the election, she's been rated as the most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate when she was representing California. Do you worry that she will be pulling the agenda to the left with Joe Biden, who yesterday tried to make it sound like he's a super centrist? He wants everybody to get together. But at the same time, his vice president is way to the left.
Yeah, well, yesterday, President Biden sounded a lot of notes of unity in his inaugural address, but unfortunately, when he got back to the White House, he implemented a bunch of far-left policies. Steve, just look at what he did on the immigration front. He ended construction of the border wall, and he eliminated the Remain in Mexico policy, which had foreigners who were trying to get into our country on fake claims of asylum stay in Mexico. Now, we're saying foreigners can show up again at our border and come into our country and wait for months, if not years, to show up for a hearing, which they may never show up for. In the meantime, we're going to have illegal aliens taking jobs from Americans at a time when we still have 10 million Americans out of work. That is a radical far-left policy that the American people don't want.
I got to ask you real quickly about this. He would like General Lloyd Austin to be his defense secretary, but he was in the military not too long ago. You need a waiver to do that. You voted for the waiver for General Mattis, but you do not want this man to wind up with a waiver. Why?
Well, first, let me say I respect Lloyd Austin and his 4 decades of service in uniform, but I've come to conclude it was a mistake to give that waiver to General Mattis 4 years ago. There are positive, sound reasons we have that cooling off period. We don't want to give the perception to general officers that if they play their cards right, they too can be a Secretary of Defense in the future. We don't want to create the perception that a recently retired officer is going to play favorites or protect against playing favorites against his service, the Army in this case, the Marine Corps in General Mattis's case. And also, general officers are expected to be apolitical. That's a tradition that goes back to George Washington. But the Secretary of Defense job is very much a political job, not a partisan job. Bob Gates, for instance, the best Secretary of Defense in modern times, served in both a Republican and a Democratic administration. But he was a very skilled political leader for the troops, fighting battles within the cabinet to make sure that they got the money and the resources they need, or against the entrenched Pentagon bureaucracy. We need a Secretary of Defense that comes in with the political experience and the skills to be an advocate against the liberal policies that other cabinet secretaries are going to be pushing, or that some in Congress may push as well. So this doesn't reflect at all overall my opinion of Lloyd Austin's service in the military for 40 years. This is about why we have that cooling off period in the first place. It was a mistake 4 years ago. Frankly, it was a mistake in 1950 when we granted a waiver to General Marshall as well. I don't think Congress should repeat that mistake anymore.
All right. Tom Cotton, Arkansas. Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Straight ahead on the